Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another One Thing. I'm your host, 𝗗𝗂𝗍𝗆, and I'm joined, as always, by the lovely Kim and Jody from ePayments. A fresh approach to payments. Just want to make sure I held long enough on that. This week, we actually have two guests on One Thing. It's the first time we've ever done that. Thank you both for taking time out to join us today. The film Fishin' Men launches September 14th. You can pre-order it now on iTunes and on Amazon. We'll have links for everything down below, but I'd like to introduce everybody to the directors and producers of Fishin' Men, Darby Duffin and Adam Jones. Welcome to the table, gentlemen. Can you tell us a little bit, let's start, because on my screen it goes Darby and Adam. So Darby, can you give us a little bit of your path to this documentary?
Yeah, so I started my career working in motion picture film and development for 6 or 7 years in Los Angeles, then dusted off a communications degree, moved back east, was working in communications and PR, for the last 10 years or so. And then I had started my own company On a Mission Media to sort of combine that background where, I was using the storytelling skills that I had from in the communication skills from both, my film experience to develop content for clients. So I shoot documentaries, mini docs for brands and corporations, and now feature docs with Fishin' Men. So there you have it.
My first job out of college was a production assistant on a TV commercial. And from there, I discovered the art department, where you get to decorate sets and build sets and see what things look like through the lens of a camera and what you can create. And then from there, I started directing about the turn of the century. And so for 20 years or so, I've been directing TV commercials and branded content for brands all around the world. And I've been fortunate to have, be able to practice my craft in a lot of different places with a lot of different people, and always kind of be directing, which that's one cool thing about commercials as opposed to features. It's like, if you're a feature director, you might direct something once every 3 years, but I get to be on set a lot. I've been on set since I got out of college, and I thought, well, yeah, let's make a feature, that's just another format. What's the big deal? If I could make something 30, 60 seconds long, what's 85 minutes? And boy, it's a different beast. It's a real different beast. So this was a complete rebirth when it comes to my journey as a filmmaker. Now I feel like I can look myself in the mirror and say I'm an actual filmmaker, but it's only taken 20 years.
Wow.
You're understating your work, both of you. I've actually seen, you can check out Darby Duffin at onamissionmedia.com. You can check out Adam Jones's work on adamrichardjones.com. Again,
I'd like to give a shout out to my website designer as well.
Guy's a drunk.
𝗗𝗿𝗍𝗆 graphics, man.
All right.
Made in Oregon.
Just looking at the cinematography, I mean, I know that's what you guys do, but like some of those you could, you said Jody's thing, you could take and make them into stills and come out with a whole line of pictures or something.
It was a rare occasion on shoots where we had actual DPs, which Adam and I are not, but.
Oh, wow.
So we kind of shot at least half the movie ourselves, but we have the help of
2/3. Yeah, I mean,
not to take any credit away from Derek McCain and John Millman, our DPs on the film, who donated so much of their time and skill and art to
for sure
the days that we actually did have DPs. I'm sure those are the shots you're referring to.
Well, like a lot of the fishing stuff, I mean, all of it, in fact, we didn't have a DP.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, a lot of those really pretty color sunrise, sunset shots, I mean, that was just Adam and I.
Wow.
That whole day.
That's impressive.
And then, I went out a couple times by myself, David Gaithel, and then I don't know if you guys have all seen it, but then the shots at the end of the movie we use, and usually that was just because you get little to no notice. You get a call the night before, hey, we're going out. It's February. It's Tuesday morning at 4 a.m. Not really. It's the night before. There's not much you can do except start charging your batteries. So
yeah, we do have a fair amount of shots that we let's just say outsourced. But
That's a good way
I
to
will
put
say,
it.
I will say learning how to curate the stock footage that you use is an art form almost unto itself. And I think between Shutterstock, Getty, iStock, every stock, Darby and I have searched and looked at every single fishing related, anything that the keyword fish is in the search term shot that every one of those libraries have. And so, yeah, that was a part of it. I mean, we just had to be really, really selective about how we used them and where we put them. And
That was, you know, when we started off talking about how long this took, Neil, that was a big part of it. You know, I remember when we're thinking about organizing shoots, one of them was, well, we have to go to Asia, right? We have to be able to get some of this footage. That was a tough one. That took a lot of research, and we found somebody that had actually gone over there and done it. And because I had threatened Adam, I was just going to go to China and probably end up in a Chinese prison somewhere. And
Locked up
you'd have
abroad.
you'd have to promote the movie without me. But
That would have been promotion in itself. You should have got yourself caned, because that puts you right at the top of the
you're
news.
right. It's not too late. Yeah, I could.
I'll cane you right now.
Yeah.
If it gets me hits. So that, hey, you know what? That's a perfect segue into my question that I have, my one thing. So you guys did a ton of travel for this. It looked like, I mean, you were talking about going to China, but you did go to Norway. You did spend a lot of time in the Northeast. A lot of the people that watch this are, where they're in different industries or sideways industry, but they do travel a ton. So when you are traveling so much, what is the number one thing you need to do when someone says like, hey, you need to be on the boat tomorrow morning, or hey, we're going to be out for 72 hours in the next day or so, get your ass out here. What's the number one thing in regards to balancing family obligations and travel when something like that pops up?
Yeah.
Balance all that.
I mean, I can start this. I'm sure it actually opens a door to a much larger question of like, how does one make a documentary? I mean, that's almost what you're asking, because the balance, the idea of just going out on a moment's notice, you know, this film was made in over a 7-year period, but you know, I use the metaphor. It was like a baseball game. It was like, you know, there's moments of play in between, lots of stillness, but over that time, and these things would come up spur of the moment, and we would have to, you know, get up and go. But our families had to sort of be okay with it. And they're
Right.
it's not just the amount of time, but it's the amount of even of our own money that we're spending to do this. So it's kind of like, how do you deal with the spur of the moment thing is a bigger question. Is like, how does one self-fund and self-produce a feature-length documentary? With the answer is, we just did it all ourselves, and we tried not to, you know, be bad husbands and dads at the same time. It's a tough answer.
I think we had unrealistic expectations early on. I think we thought we could get this film out. We shot the bulk of it in 2 years, and then off and on for the next year and a half or so. So I think by the end of 2016, we were pretty much done shooting, but all along the way, you know, we were, as Adam said, you know, paying for it out of our own pocket. And I certainly didn't realize, you know, how deep we would be digging into our own pockets, nor how expensive it would get, as much as we were able to sort of, you know, keep the budgets tight. You know, I think we initially thought 250,000, that seemed
Like a lot.
you know, unbelievably, you know, like, how are we going to do that? If we knew that at the beginning, we would have walked away. You
Probably
know,
would have walked away in fear.
and having that film done enough to where you could submit it, and then, you know, these cycles come up, and you got a window, and if you want to go to Sundance, you got to get a submission in. That was the other big learning curve. I'll let Adam take it from there. But what we thought the film was done, I think in 2016. He can talk about these private screenings and what wake up that was,
Yeah.
what a reality check that was for us.
That was one of the darkest days. We had I had paid for me to fly and sit with an editor for like 2 weeks in New York City, a guy that I knew through advertising circles who had agreed to work for a favor rate. And I sat, until 3 a.m, night after night, getting it ready for what we thought was going to be our Tribeca Film Festival submission. And this was like, we're putting all our eggs in this basket. And so then my friend in Los Angeles says, have you test screened it yet? I'll do one for you if you want. And so I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure it's awesome. I don't know why we really need a test screening, but sure. I wasn't like that, but I was like, of course, let's do it. So he puts this group of like kind of heavy hitter documentary and filmmaker types and people in the industry, mostly insiders, in a room in his living room. And it was about a dozen people. And we watched the movie. And then afterwards, they just proceeded to eviscerate everything that we had done. I mean, after I had gotten back from New York, and I remember, and Darby was on the phone and I was there. And I just remember I stayed up that night, just like trying to figure out like how I could have been so far off, and that was December 2016. And after that night, when we thought we were done, ready for the world, we edited for another 18 months.
Wow.
18 months, full-time editor. Forget about how much that is per day,
How much is this gonna cost?
I think, in these ways, this is how we grew as filmmakers through this process. Like we had to earn our stripes. That
was definitely the low point.
Yeah,
I remember
I was ready to throw in the towel after that night. I really was.
Yeah.
Well, you sound like entrepreneurs.
Well, and I was going to say that's a great lead into my question, because just listening to what you've shared, what you've had to endure and the patience and what you went through, what is the one thing you would tell people to keep them motivated, keep going? Like, how do you do that day in, day out?
It's like anything in life. You're either going to give up or you're going to persevere no matter what.
Right.
And at that point, we had invested so much, not just money, but time and energy and,
The support
emotion.
of friends and family. Yeah.
Yeah. That it was like, it's funny because I didn't take the critique. I wasn't there facing it. So, I give Adam the credit for taking the bullets, the hailfire of bullets. But it's, it gave me a step back. So I'm listening to it. But there were, these guys were going this direction, that direction, and you can easily get taken off what your vision is, your objective. And you're listening to people that have, made and sold documentaries before. And, here we are, first time filmmakers, started off with a vision, wouldn't be here, if we didn't have one. But then, that's where you have to really believe in what it is you're doing and what you're going after. It doesn't mean you don't listen, you don't make adjustments, you don't, like Adam said, maybe there's some actionable advice here, but you don't go and like start reshooting, where does this end?
Right. I love that.
So,
that kind of leads me into my question, which I have a kind of a two-part question for both of you in a sense. You had said that you had an unexpected conversation with a fisherman's wife that haunted you for 2 years. A lot of people, I'm an emphatic person, a lot of people have empathy, but I would like to know what about that conversation haunted you to the point where you and Adam, because I know you went a lot of different directions before the two of you sat down to that lunch and said, yeah, let's do it, despite the fact that making this film required more perseverance, patience, and sacrifice than I ever imagined. This film extracted every ounce of ingenuity, energy, and adaptability that I could muster.
So it was a chance meeting I had. We were actually looking for houses, my wife and I, and it's, when you're looking for houses, you're not usually having these long conversations, or certainly personal ones. And this ended up kind of being one of those. And so it just was unexpected. And she was obviously, I could see the emotion and the personal cost it had. So I ended up doing some pro bono work with her. And, that's when I kind of began to see for the first time what the real conditions were like for an industry that I thought was doing just fine. And so it was that. And then I was, there was a local fish market I used to go to. And then I was like, oh, this is so, now I'm looking, with a different perspective. And I'm noticing that, there's no local seafood or very little, and you can literally see the boats, fishing boats, from this particular market. And so for me, that was the light bulb that went off. It was like, oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense. I mean, these takes a lot to get that inertia going. Like what, you have a story, but then like, how do you, where do you start? And so that was sort of the impetus for me to kind of put the concept down on paper, pitch it, see how it did, and then, believe in it enough to go, yeah. And it was accessible.
This story is incredibly, like from the get-go, I wasn't prepared for the emotional level. Like I've followed this for years. I was part of that Indiegogo campaign. Like that's where I first got vested. I mean, Adam had talked about it before, but you watch the trailer, that's emotionally charged. But the show right out of the gate, where the guy's talking about an Edmund Fitzgerald type event where he's like, he got rescued, he got pulled out, teenager, like 20 something, 6'2", pulled out of the water. I'm like, I'm not going to make it through this thing.
Yeah.
Like, what's the thing you do to remain emotionally impartial or to remove that from the equation?
I don't know that you want to remove your emotion from it. I mean, I think you mentioned the opening scene. Let me just comment on that real quick, because starting the movie, editorially speaking, narratively speaking, was the most difficult part of the edit. And we probably tried maybe eight different opens, Darby. And that scene was during the day. It was during the day that we went out for 18 hours on the boat. I was seasick. I got seasick that day. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been seasick to play.
I have.
Yes.
And there's nowhere to go, and the sea will not stop moving ever. And Darby also got a little seasick, but he muscled through it. He was up in the wheelhouse with that dude, Russell Sherman, the captain. And he sat there and rolled on him for like 3 hours straight, just talking. And I was curled up in a fetal position near the engine room because it was warm. And he got this story from Russell about what happened to him that time. And we use it on a voice on, you see him tell the story a couple of times, but it's the audio mostly that we use. And Darby was like, let's try it here. Let's try it here. We kept moving that scene, and we kept, because all the footage that you see in that open too, that's another one of those like very, very carefully curated uses of stock footage mixed, because we didn't have any imagery to go with that, and that was my thing. I was like, how are we going to connote the imagery that goes with him telling the story? It can't just be him stand, and open the film. And so it really became this kind of it was very difficult because, like I said, we tried 7 things before it. But Darby was super persistent about like, this is the way, this story has to be in the movie. And we're like, well, if it's not going to be in the open, I don't know where to put this thing, And so then once we also, let's give a shout out to Heidi Zimmerman, our editor, because she took that conversation, that him telling that story was like 47 minutes long or something.
Right.
And after pass after pass after pass, she got it down as tight as you see it in the open. And then I was combing through stock, and I actually did a few effect shots. Like there's a scene where the raindrops are going bird's eye down on a boat to show them floating by themselves. Like that's like 4 layers of stuff in there. Like I found a boat layer, it was a still, I put the people in it. I found a rain alpha channel on Shutterstock that was coming down. And like, so we built these images to sort of just connote what was going on. And we've gotten so many comments on the way that it started, because we're hooking you emotionally right out of the gate, and then trying to segue into the material that we're talking about, which is, the cod fishing situation. So I think, not to blather on and on, but the real challenge to this was that we realized that the arc of the Gloucester fisherman is not necessarily going to have a happy ending. It's kind of like on a downward trajectory, and there's really no way to fix that. So that doesn't really make for a good film. So what we had to do is, like, we knew that was the beating heart of the film. was Gloucester and the fishermen in particular.
And he lived. He
And he
lived.
lived. So
He lived to tell the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the open, right? It's critical. You got to get hooked in that first 2 minutes. Yeah, I felt, very passionate about that being how we get you in, because you got to get them in emotionally. But to Adam's point, it was a tough edit to get there. But I mean, my original pitch for this was Deadliest Catch Meets Food Inc. So I'd always wanted to incorporate some kind of the danger of that job, of that profession, right? It's one or two of the most dangerous jobs you can have. And that sort of story just takes you there, tells you that immediately. And like you said, Neil, you instantly realize that and have a whole new profound admiration for what these guys do. We don't think about that. What we knew the challenge was going to be, this was a very informational type of film. We have so much to throw at you informationally, but at the same time, the real challenge was, how do we involve the audience, make them care about these characters? So we were always trying to find moments where we could develop character, make the audience care in between, what we're trying to give you informationally. So I think we finally found that happy balance in the film, but it took a long time.
And like you were saying, the layers of that, I actually thought you found some footage with the freaking Coast Guard or whatever. It was so well done.
That was amazing find, yeah. And I liked Adam's response too. He talked about, how do you as a filmmaker take your emotion out? And yeah, I agree. You can't, but I will say this in terms of like one that hit me hard in the gut. And I know it did for Adam too. And I know when we were in the middle of this interview in my head, and I think he was thinking the same, I knew immediately, like, this, we have a film, like this is going to be we have something here. And that was the interview with Rich Burgess. And of course we used that in our many iterations of trailers, Rich's reaction. But it was that interview, which I think that might have actually been our first interview, Adam. But when we walked out of Rich's house that day, and we had a couple other interviews more to do that day, but, I looked at Adam and I was like, yeah, basically it's on, because that, was what you can't make that happen. You hope that's what you get in all these interviews, but the reality, the stark reality of a grown man, a middle-aged grown man, showing you that kind of emotion up close and personal was, for me, I knew, like, yeah, we just might have something here.
You absolutely do, because that, as I said, from the very start, where that you had to say 7 different maybe iterations of the intro, that intro was perfect, but leading into those fishermen's story, it's like one after another, like the outrageousness of the situation, like the absolute, like everybody's going through it in some way or shape or form, whether it be through an economy or a shifting, pandemic rules or whatever. Everybody's like, why am I at the behest of these ever-changing, like, slide whistle of incomprehensible rules that I have no idea what's going on? Like, everybody deals with that, but these guys their entire livelihoods, generations are being impacted by this. Yeah, that's why I was saying that's where that question comes from, is that I was outraged 10 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you guys go 7 years and like not be like?
And we were tempted along the ways, I think, to find a villain, right? Who's your antagonist? We would get this question, where's, is it the government? And is it John Bullard? I mean, that was sort of the most obvious choice.
John Bullard,
we had a lot of conversations about this topic, Adam and I, and, we were hesitant to do that. At the same time, we wanted to show the clear animosity between these two forces. But, I think where we landed and where you come from, or where you come to, is much more accurate, which is really, the system. It's the system, it's the globalization of this industry that, you know, this is where we've come to. And I don't know if Adam wants to chime in on that, but it's an important point because it was one that we wrestled with for quite a while.
Yeah, just we didn't want to vilify any person or thing, because every stakeholder has their own perspective on the issue, but it was easy to vilify the globalization of the industry. So you just blame it on China.
Yeah, there you go.
Those fish farms were awful. Like the freaking, what is that, MC Escher painting ass?
Yeah.
Like, that's freaking.
What makes you want to go get a tilapia sandwich, huh?
No.
No.
Stick with that barrel fish, Kimberly.
Yes.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah,
I
barrel.
will.